I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Township of Old Bridge Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting, October 3, 2019. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Old Bridge Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting by prominently posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, the date, the location, and the agenda of this meeting, also by mailing such announcement to the Home News and Tribune, and finally by filing a copy of such announcement with the municipal clerk. Ms. Silverman, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Dukers?
Present.
Ms. Chevalier?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Keller?
Here.
Here.
Mr. Sachs?
Here.
Mr. Long? Here. Mr. Hart?
Here.
Ms. Jones? Here. Mr. Lukowski?
Here.
Thank you. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Folks, if you're here in the courtroom this evening, I'd ask everybody to silence their phones, please, or mute them, turn them off, just so we don't interrupt those that are going to testify in front of the board this evening. This meeting is being televised on local cable station 15 here in the township. As such, the cable goes off at 10:30 p.m. If you're watching at home,
10.
I'm sorry?
10.
At 10? I'm sorry, 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. So if you're watching at home, the meeting might very well be going on beyond that, but the cable station does have to turn off because of the operators at that particular time. I'll try and notify you at home if I notice that on the clock, but it will be going off. Also, if you have an agenda in front of you, folks, we'll follow the agenda with the exception of the last two applications. They'll be inverted there. Metro Storage will be number 4, and number 3 will be Dennis Burkowski. Other than that, we'll follow the agenda. This meeting starts at 7:30 and is scheduled to end at 10:30. We have 4 rather, I would think, large applications in the sense that they may be a little time consuming. To be fair, we have to get each one on. We're assigning 45 minutes at this point to each application. So attorneys and professionals, I'll be watching the clock. I'll let you know when we start, and you'll get 45 minutes beyond that. Obviously, we're going to probably have a couple breaks, so that time will probably pass beyond the 10:30 mark, but I'd like to try and keep it as close as possible. If there's any time yielded by people finishing early, certainly that'll be assessed and moved on to the other applications. Having said that, we're going to move right along. This number 2, escrow deficiency resolutions. We have one, it's 13-19Z, Nassau Development LLC in the amount of $350. That has not been paid, correct? No. No. Board members, someone want to move it?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Dukers?
Yes.
Ms. Keller?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes. Okay, right along to the first application of the evening, we'd ask you to come up. This is 12-19Z Wawa Inc. It's located in the EDO 3 zone. This is for preliminary and final major site plan, existing storage gas station, and it's for the sale of diesel fuel. Mr. Prime is representing, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. Duncan Prime from the firm of Prime and Tubell, for the record.
Put the mic on.
Once again, Duncan Prime from the firm of Prime and Tuvell, representing the applicant Wawa with reference to our application here this evening. The board will recall that we were here back in January of this year, January 10th to be exact, with an application for diesel fuel. The application then was different than the one now. It had some bulk variances associated with it. That application, as you will remember, we did not receive a favorable vote on that application. We went back with our engineer and came up with another plan that is variance-free, does not have any bulk variances. It meets all of the terms of your zoning code. We resubmitted that plan a few months ago. We received a review letter from your board planner and engineer. We took some time to address that in the best way we thought we could, and we are here before you this evening. Under the municipal land use law, I will turn it over to Mr. Sachs very quickly, but we are permitted to come back, even though we were denied in January, with a substantially altered application. The term res judicata is thrown out there a lot. That means we would be barred from coming back. You can't bring an application that's exactly the same back every month and try to get it approved. You have to change it. So that is what we did. The case law is well established that if you eliminate variances from the plan, your plan is then significantly different by default. Mr. Sachs, I just asked very briefly for purposes of the record that the board, it's your opinion, the board can accept jurisdiction and hear our application tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Prime. Yes, if the board will recall, and I believe most of the members were here that evening, this is an application that has been modified, has been revised. Variances have been eliminated. Under the theory of res judicata, as Mr. Prime indicated, you would not be able to come back with the same application and try to get a second bite of the apple. As well, there has to be some type of significant change. I always cite the case, I think it's Bressman versus Gash is the leading case on this. But in my opinion, res judicata would not apply with respect to this particular applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. The board does recognize that it is a different application. Is there any board member that has any problem with this? Okay, move forward, Mr. Prime.
Thank you very much. I made reference earlier to a comment in the review letter. I had a chance to talk to your planner today, as well as the board attorney. But it was a reference to a potential use variance with this application. And it was our position, and is still our position, that a use variance here would not be required. The comment really was innocuous in nature, but still needed to be addressed. It's our position that our use was granted via the use variance from 10 years ago with the original application. Our application tonight is simply proposing to sell another type of fuel, which is permitted by your ordinance. There's no prohibition on diesel anywhere in your code. It's simply another offer that we are looking to include in this store. We are not making any site plan modifications that would rise above the standard, which is de minimis here. And I will have my engineer provide some very brief testimony momentarily to show you that we're really proposing nothing new on this site. We're not increasing the footprint. We're not touching the building. We are not adding any gas pumps. We're simply switching out a pump type so it can pump diesel along with premium, mid-grade, and regular fuel. It is not any other change aside from that. Mr. Sachs, again, I'll turn it back to you. I would ask that the board vote first on an interpretation, which is that a use variance, a D variance, is not required here, so that I can proceed with site plan only. I do not have a professional planner. I'm not prepared to put that testimony on the record, as I don't think it's warranted. But at this point, Mr. Sachs, I'd again turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Prime.
You're welcome.
And I'm not sure, I think the board may have been in receipt of a letter that Mr. Prime sent regarding a request for an interpretation. It was more in the form of a legal brief. You know, actually, I don't think many of the members were on, I don't think anybody was on this board when this application was initially denied. It was denied, and then it went to court, and the Middlesex County Superior Court reversed it and granted the use variance approval. So, it does already have a use variance for the use that is presently being occupied on this site, will not change in the future. So at least it's my opinion that use variance is not necessary. I know I spoke to Ms. Savant earlier today, and I believe she's of the same opinion. Am I correct?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
I would like Ms. Sawant to go on the record.
Yes, and basically, I think there was some miscommunication, I would say. There is no new use variance required. When the applicant came in front of the board last year, there was a use variance triggered due to one, the application not meeting one of the conditions of the conditional use, which was related to the parking setback. In fact, it was two. One was the minimum lot area and the other was the setback requirement. However, the minimum lot area variance was already granted by the board. So they were not asking for that variance at that time. It was assumed they were already granted that one. The only new one at that time was the setback. This new application, the applicant has eliminated that variance, and so there is no new use variance, or there is no variance involved. So I agree with Mr. Prime. Mr. Sachs and I spoke this morning too, and I am fine with the determination. Yes, no problem.
For the record, I was here for the 2009.
Yes, I was going to correct you, Mr. Sachs. I do remember your chairman very well. I have testimony from our engineer that I'm prepared to also have him testify in site plan. If the board would like to hear him testify as to the interpretation, I can have him on the record and give his professional engineering opinion that this is a de minimis change to the site plan, if
No,
the board wants to hear that.
I don't think it's necessary at this point to deal with the interpretation, so
Got it.
why don't we just go forward with the case in chief?
Okay, if it's okay with the board, I would ask for a vote on the,
Fine with, does any board member have a problem? Please speak up. None? Mr. Prime?
understood. All right, well, I'd like to proceed right to site plan then, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the purpose of the record, Duncan Prime from the firm of Prime and Tuvel. I will not waste the board's time, as I understand you have 4 applications tonight. Reintroducing the application, the board's intimately familiar with it. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Kloss to present the site plan testimony, which is very minimal, as discussed earlier.
Sir, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Ronald Kloss, K-L-O-S, with Bowler Engineering. And I was here at the last application.
Yes, I'll switch one down.
Sure.
Ron, why don't you walk the board through the changes to the site plan, however minor they will be?
Recognize his expertise. He did testify before this board. That's
Hear any
fine.
questions? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ron.
I'll make this brief, as Duncan said. Site improvements are very minimal here. If you recall, the last time we were here, we were adding 1 tank to the site for the placement of fuel, the diesel fuel. We were also adding a vent stack pad alongside of it, along with some other minor site modifications. We have since removed the proposed fuel tank and removed the proposed vent stack pad that was on the north side of the site. What Wawa is proposing to do at this time is, if you're familiar with the site, between the canopy, just to the west of, or east of the canopy, I apologize, there are 3 tanks. 2 of those tanks are compartmentalized tanks. The northern side, the 2 outside tanks are compartmentalized. Wawa would remove product from one of the northernmost tanks. It's a 12,000 gallon compartment of the 20,000 gallon total that tank can hold. That's the premium tank. Remove the product from there and would use that 12,000 gallon area for the diesel fuel. Again, it's an existing tank, it's in place, we're not doing any excavation, we're not doing any modifications to the tank or anything like that. There's also an existing vent stack pad that when these tanks were installed, the venting was already piped from the tank to a second vent stack. We need the second vent stack for the diesel fuel that needs to be vented separately from the gasoline. There's an existing vent stack that's there that is not extended all the way up like the one that you see out in the field right now. It's cut off maybe about 1 foot off of the ground. What Wawa would do would extend that vent stack pad up to 12 feet in height so it would match the one that's out there. And that's all that would be done in the area of the tank. As far as the other improvements of the site, those are the same that we proposed previously, which would be to remove the existing MPDs and replace them with 4+1 product MPDs. And that would allow the sale of 4 grades of gasoline and then 1 grade, the separate one, you'd have a separate nozzle for the diesel fuel. We would also propose, as we did before, which would be refacing of the freestanding sign out on Route 9. But again, that would be a refacing in that we are not increasing the size of the sign at all. All we're doing is removing the pricing on that sign so that instead of reading the 3 grades of gasoline, it would read your pricing for your regular gasoline and your pricing for your diesel. And then we've also proposed, as we did before, to post at each of the MPDs a no tractor trailer fueling signs. As we testified before, while I was not interested in selling diesel fuel to a tractor trailer, there's not going to be any fueling for tractor trailers at this site. So we've agreed to post no tractor trailer fueling signs at each of the MPDs. So it would be on either side of the canopy. So regardless of which side of the canopy you're coming from, you would be able to see that.
Ron, a quick follow-up question. There was a comment in the letter regarding signage, specifically on the actual pump. We're showing what on the pump? I believe with our prior application, we showed the word Wawa with a goose. Now we've eliminated part of that. What are we showing now?
Correct. We have, if you look at the detail that's in the plan set that shows the MPD itself, we still show the Wawa lettering at the bottom of the MPD. At the top, we previously had proposed the Wawa goose logo. We've removed that goose logo from there, as that was constituted signage from our last discussion.
So the sign just says Wawa, only the word Wawa? So it
Correct.
identifies the product being sold?
That is correct.
Okay. Lastly, I made a representation earlier in my opening that this new plan put together by your office requires no variance relief from the board. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I have no further follow-up questions of Mr. Kloss.
This is the one?
Yes. So, from what I understand, on each side of the fueling pump, there would be a Wawa sign, right?
Yeah, of the MPD itself?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. That lettering would be on either side.
Okay. Because the ordinance, section 250-52F1, permits a freestanding sign and two add-on signs pertaining to products or services offered by the gasoline station displayed on freestanding sign. Each add-on sign shall not exceed 4 square feet. The larger Wawa sign measures 1.21 square feet, is that right?
Correct. That is the square footage of the Wawa lettering.
And it just says that although the proposed sign complies with the size requirement, these signs are placed on the fuel dispenser and therefore are not permitted because those, they're not technically add-on signs. So,
It was our position, we're required by state law to identify the gas. That's become more and more important and under more scrutiny as more dual operators have opened, such as 7-Eleven selling Citgo or what you may. So we have to put Wawa over on the fuel pump somewhere. It has to be by state law. So we didn't consider those signage when we took our identification, the goose logo off and all that, just the word Wawa is on there. That was our position. If you interpret it differently,
in the past, we have treated it as a sign, and I admit our signage ordinance is not the best. There are some flaws. We are I'm being nice. There are major flaws with the sign ordinance, and we are currently working on it to clean it up. But as you know, signage ordinance is always a challenging one. So in that aspect, I would just go by the conservative approach and ask for a variance on that one.
I would think it would be, from a personal standpoint, I think it's necessary.
Yes.
I didn't realize it was a state law,
It
but
is.
I see it on gas pumps.
Yes. It's just a
Particularly when
technical.
there's a mix of fuels.
Yep.
And you don't want, if this state ever goes to self-service,
I know.
you certainly wouldn't want people making that mistake.
That's correct.
So I kind of agree that that should be labeled.
I
didn't
do
even
agree.
realize the state requires you to.
it does.
I do agree, and it's just a technicality which we will clean up when we have the
Okay.
newer
Would it be a
ordinance.
waiver, or would we actually do a variance? on
It's
it?
still a variance.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Watt?
The other thing, I know I had commented on the no tractor trailer signs on the pump, and my understanding is you see those signs only after you enter the property, but you don't see that prior to entering. So which would also mean that a tractor would enter the site and then see the no tractor trailer fueling sign. Would you be willing, because I feel your freestanding side, anyways, you're facing it, and it would be more beneficial to the patrons to see that sign even before they enter the site. Do you have any?
It's I think
Opinion
we
on
did
that.
explain this in January as well. It's usually our preference to try to limit it to the pumps because they are not permitted to fuel, but they are customers at this store and others. When we put it on the freestanding sign, it turns away their business completely. They see it and they don't come on the site, for better or worse. But it's not something we're looking to do. They can come on for coffee and a sandwich. They just can't fuel. That's kind of why we leave those signs in that location, so they know if they come on, they're limited to the convenience store only. That's why we don't do it.
Okay.
And it's very rarely done elsewhere, not just here.
If we happen to retain those signs, then that becomes a variance too, correct?
Excuse me?
If we retain those no tractor trailer signs on the pump, then that becomes a sign as well, correct? And that would
Yes,
trigger a
if we
variance.
do the no tractor trailer fueling signs as requested on the what do you call it? The fuel pumps, yes, the poles, the columns, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Claus. On the columns, yes, that would be a variance. That was requested by the board.
Perfect, that's it.
Mr. McCaskey?
What's the nature of the, what's the nature of the fleet of vehicles you do want to serve at the pumps?
I'll let Ron testify to that. Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's your normal passenger cars that are now going to diesel more and more. You also see some, your F-250 type trucks, some vans, step vans. Those are the normal type of vehicles that come on the site. But again, we cut it off at a tractor trailer. Anything that has the tractor plus the trailer is not permitted to fuel. But other vehicles, which may be a larger van or even sometimes you see like a larger SUV type vehicle, those are permitted to fuel as with the diesel.
Buses and dump trucks?
Possibly, yes.
But buses we found have contracts elsewhere at the bus depot, usually where they can fill up and they're encouraged to fill up and they can use their specific card to do so. Very rarely do they fill up at a Wawa. It's
I mean, do you find at similar...
self-regulating.
Do you find at similar sites where the diesel is now offered for, non-tractor trailer vehicles that you run into a problem with that them entering the site, or they just know, through their business model that, these sites can't support the tractor trailer circulation?
Yeah, they know. Again, most of them use a ComCheck or ComData, which Wawa doesn't accept. The fueling on these types of pumps is down at 8 to 10 gallons per minute, whereas when you get to a truck stop, those are like 10 times that amount. So if a large truck did pull in there, a tractor trailer did pull in there, it would take a long while for them to fill up. They know that Wawa, by now they know that Wawa doesn't service their vehicles, the tractor trailer vehicles.
We've been selling diesel now since 2011, and we do not sell it to tractor trailers elsewhere. It's not just here, it's anywhere. So they have had 8 years now on the roadways to know that we will not service them. So,
And we had a similar comment in our report about, adding the no tractor trailer signage on the freestanding sign. Hearing the applicant's argument against it, I understand. I mean, it's the vehicles that do not want to serve. I've seen it in a testimony on other boards too for similar gas stations, Royal Farms and other, they know they can't go there. And that's what you're kind of relying on. So I'll defer the rest of my questions to the traffic engineer. Is he testifying?
he is. He's our last witness when we're done with Mr. Claus.
Anything else, Mr. McCaskey?
Not right now, thanks.
Board members to my left for this witness.
I have two questions. Number one, where will the tractor trailer come in? When he comes in, he's going to go for his breakfast. Where is he going to go?
Yeah, I'm typically what ends up happening is not only them, but a truck that may be pulling a trailer would pull up. Sometimes they like I saw it tonight alongside where the on the opposite side of the tanks, or maybe along back in the loading area, just off to that area, if there's nobody back in that area, is
That's a
usually what
tight
happens.
squeeze to get around there. And you have 12 pumps presently
oversized
there,
parking.
1 through 12. Which one are you referring to going to be replacing for diesel?
They all will. So there's 6 multi-product dispensers with, you can service on both sides, so there's 12 fueling positions. All of them would have the ability to fuel diesel. So every one of them will get the 4+1 that I referenced earlier.
In your last visit, you said that the tank was going to be divided into 2 to maybe provide a different type of fuel down the road. That's out of the question now, right?
So we're not proposing any new tanks, but as I mentioned before, the tanks that are in the ground right now, the 2 outside tanks are compartmentalized. They're 20,000-gallon tanks that are compartmentalized into a 12,000-gallon and a 8,000-gallon compartment.
On
We're-
one stack?
I'm sorry?
On one stack?
When you say one
The
stack?
stack, the venting stack?
So the 12,000 gallon compartment is already piped to the vent stack pad that is not extended up above the ground right now, or is extended only a foot or so off the ground. That was already installed back when these original tanks were installed. So the venting is already there underground. All we need to do is extend it above ground further now.
And if you were going to use a different type of fuel, what were you thinking?
I don't know what the future holds. 10 years ago, we didn't think we'd be here for diesel, and here we are. Who knows what could be? So Wawa does compartmentalize tanks just for that, and usually they set up the product piping underground so that in the future, if they needed to go to some alternate fuel, they could do so without digging up any of the product piping, the tanks, or anything like that, and minimize the disturbance.
Yeah, I just need to revisit when you do pull into Wawa, Wawa's right there, so that tractor trailer's got to go somewhere, or he's blocking traffic.
And the tractor trailers can circulate the site. I mean, the site is set up with drive aisles such that they can get around the site. The vehicles that have to deliver to the loading zone are tractor trailers, and the site was designed to accommodate them originally.
As well as the fuel delivery comes in on a tractor trailer.
Correct.
If you look at that map, it's a right to left circulation. It's a counterclockwise circulation. Any other questions on my left? Board members on my right? Mr. Sachs?
No, I'm good.
Next witness.
Okay, I have one final witness, our traffic engineer, Mr. Dave Shropshire. Dave?
Mr. Shropshire, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
David Shropshire, S-H-R-O-P-S-H-I-R-E, traffic engineer for the project, professional engineer, professional planner.
And Dave, you provided your credentials at the last hearing. You were recognized as an expert. Would the board like to hear Mr. Shropshire's credentials one more time?
I recognize Mr. Shropshire. I'm sure other members do.
Okay, great. Dave, would you care to share your findings with the board?
Yeah, I'm just going to briefly summarize what we have in the report, and it really hopefully will address some of the comments that Mr. Winkowski had in his review. The first one is, where do we come up with a de minimis 5% increase in the trip generation related to the addition of this new offering with regard to fuel? Quite honestly, we picked something de minimis because we had no data on it. And NJDOT would say we would have a 0 increase because we're not really changing anything on the site except for having a new offering. We knew that that wasn't satisfactory for a reviewing entity who wanted to take some account that there might be some increase related to this. We picked 5%. That was done probably 5 or 6 years ago when we originally did the first diesel offering. In the meantime, Wawa's experience has sort of justified that number in terms of the diesel sales that they do. And it's consistent with what you've heard already in testimony, which it's basically passenger cars, patrons of Wawa that now can get this offering that were already on site. We probably overestimated with the 5%, but we threw 5% in there to see what impact that would have. What impact it has, there's obvious delays that were recognized in our report and also in the review for the right turn maneuver coming out of Route 9, and it's just based on the heavy traffic that's along Route 9. I can say that the modeling that we did for that intersection, the driveway intersection, is a little bit more simplistic than the complex situation that's out there. It has a hard time handling 3 lanes with a shoulder lane that's used for high occupancy vehicles and signalization upstream that creates gaps in traffic that are great in some extent. But the bottom line is when we did our traffic counts out there, we didn't find any delays in terms of the queuing that went into the site that caused any interference with regard to site circulation. And as a result, the modeling doesn't look real good, but the operation is actually better than what was modeled from the counts that we took. So the bottom line is this de minimis increase in traffic, if there is one, is not going to create any real change that you'll see on the site. And so from that perspective, we don't have to go through any NJDOT permitting for this because they don't recognize it as any increase. And that's about as succinctly as I can summarize.
Thank you,
what's in the
Dean.
report.
Mr. Drun, you commenting on this one? No?
Yeah.
Just Mr. Winkowski?
Yeah, I did for
Okay,
you.
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Mr. Shropshire. What we use for trip generation or estimates is usually based on floor area, the use, the number of pumps. None of that's changing. But with all things being equal, you add a new product, you kind of have to assume there's going to be some. You're serving a whole new, fleet of vehicles out there to be drawn to your site. Their number seems to be, reasonable. And his testimony is that the increase in traffic that this could generate, based on their experience, is minimal. I don't believe the site, the access driveway coming in and off of Route 9, it's pretty tight. The site's real tight. There's a lot of queuing and stacking, but their testimony is it's not really going to change with the additional diesel. If I go back to the drawing board for this site, if it was vacant, maybe we'd have different comments on the access drive and the stacking and the queuing and the circulation, but that's not in play here. It's really just a concern with the diesel, and he's testifying there is no change, and we don't really have a data to support just by adding diesel, you're going to have a noticeable increase in trips. So.
Thank you. Mrs. Watt, any comment? Board members on my left, questions of this witness, please. None? Board members on my right?
No.
Mr. Sachs?
No.
That concludes our direct testimony. We're happy to take any other questions,
Let me
either
just
Ron
check
or
the fire marshal,
Dave.
seeing as he's here tonight.
Sure.
I haven't seen him in so long. Before you retired. For the engineer or for the traffic, any questions? Any comments on the application? Not at all. Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Again, that concludes our testimony. We're happy to come back here with a completely conforming plan. I think it worked out for us and the board in the end. Thank you.
Want to go to the public portion, right?
Absolutely, sure.
This is matter 12-19Z. It's Wawa, located at 3600 US 9 South, for the sale of diesel fuel. Is anyone here in the room this evening want to be heard? Please raise your hand or come forward. No one has. I'll close the public portion. Any final comments, sir?
No further comments. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sachs, we have bulk variances.
Yeah, we have the bulk variances, which would be C variances for the sign. His notice, applicant's notice did reference the fact any variance relief which might arise during the course of the hearing.
Yes, it did.
Which did arise. And then obviously preliminary and final.
Right. They had the existing nonconformity, right?
Yes.
Okay. Someone want to,
Let's do the bulk, let's do the bulk variance
we can do
first.
the bulk together and then
Yeah,
the
yeah.
preliminary and final. We'll do all the bulk together. Anyone want to move them?
I'll move them.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Chevalier? Yes. Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Dooher?
Yes.
Ms. Tilden?
Yes.
Mr. Stockton?
Yes.
Mr. Stoner?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. Preliminary, right?
Yep. Let's do preliminary.
Preliminary site plan.
I'll move it.
I'll second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Chevalier? Yes. Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Dooher?
Yes.
Ms. Tilden?
Yes.
Mr. Stockton?
Yes.
Mr. Stoner?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. And then final.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Mr. Stoner, second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Dooher?
Yes.
Ms. Tilden?
Yes.
Mr. Stockton?
Yes.
Mr. Stoner?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. Mr. Prime, thank you and your witnesses for your presentation.
Thank
this
you.
evening.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for the
It
patience.
also
as well.
saved your fellow colleagues 15 minutes.
I do what I can for these guys. All along.
Quick break. I'm going to call a quick recess. Please, I'd ask the board to stay on the dais unless you have to use the restroom. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Roll call, please, Ms. Silverman.
Ms. Chevalier? Here. Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Dooher?
Here.
Ms. Tilden?
Here.
Mr. Stockton?
Here.
Mr. Stoner?
Here.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Sachs?
Here.
Mr. Watt? Here. Mr. Hart? Here. Mr. Darday?
Present.
Here.
Okay, the next application for the evening, 6-19Z. This is 98 Ann Street LLC, located at 314 Highway 34. Two buildings, one residential building, second office with ancillary storage garage. This is for preliminary and major site plan, residential and non-residential. We have a D variance. It's located in the EDO 1 zone, Board. Salvatore Alfieri, representing the applicant. Sir?
Dante Alfieri on behalf of the applicant tonight. My
Oh,
father.
you're your father and son.
Yeah, I'm the younger, better-looking version.
You know what? You know what it was? The beard. Full.
It makes me look a little more distinguished and older.
Dante Alfieri.
Yes. Tonight, we are here, as the chairman stated. Good evening, first. Secondly, 314 Highway 34, which is fronts on Amboy Road and Highway 34. There are two principal uses, one being a warehouse and the second being a residential house. Tonight, I'm going to have three professionals provide testimony. I'm going to have Jacqueline Floor provide engineering. Then I'm going to have Lee Klein provide traffic engineering. And then I'm going to have Christine Cafone provide planning testimony. Hopefully, with the time allotted, we can get through all three. So first, I'm going to bring up Ms. Floor to come out and provide some engineering testimony. Come on up.
Ms. Floor, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Jacqueline, Jaclyn, Floor, Flor. I'm a professional engineer, professional planner, and a certified municipal engineer. I'm the president and CEO of Ingenuity Infrastructure. I have been practicing engineering since 1999. I got my engineering license in 2004. I'm licensed in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York.
Who accept your credentials?
So, Ms. Floor, could you please orient the board to the site?
Sure. If it's okay, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
can I approach the board? And I apologize, I did not know that you had the electric, this is the first time I've been to this location, otherwise I would have given you these electronically.
Feel free to move about the room.
So I brought 3 exhibits. Thank you so much. So I brought 3 exhibits, and so let me just walk you through these 3 exhibits. Exhibit 1, I will call A1. This is a board that's just showing the property. I didn't put anything on top of it so you could see the existing condition of the property. Right now, it's unrestricted access. There's Amboy Road, which is a Middlesex County road, and you have Route 34 in the front, which is a state highway. As a little background, just to let you know, we've already gone to DOT and gotten the minor access permit, and we've already gone to the county, and we can talk about that in a little bit, and gotten approval from the county. We had met very, very early on with your professionals. They were kind enough to give us a meeting over a year ago, and they asked that we do those 2 approvals first, just because both frontages happen to be outside of local jurisdiction, so if they weren't going to be on board, then they wanted us to get those out of the way first, so we did do that. Let me first turn this around so you can see this. This is the existing condition. As you can see, it's a triangular property. If we go actually to the second sheet of the plans, that might also be easier to see. You can see the triangular property, how it actually comes out. And the road comes over, and this is unrestricted right here. Cars right now can pull in and out of the property. We will call this Exhibit A2. This is the same exact aerial, but showing you that we're trying to make it safer here. We're going to put a curb around the property, define the access in the front by adding an apron, and DOT wanted this to be a defined access because right now you can just access the property from any direction that you wish. They wanted us to define this access, which we did. And we separated the access in the back to have a single access to the parking area, rather than, as you remember before, when I flipped the board, you could basically pull in from any direction. Sure. I will turn this now so the professionals can see it as well. And would you like me to bring it closer? Okay.
They have great vision.
And this last exhibit, we will call A3. And this is really the site plan you have in front of you. I don't even know if you need me to mark this one because you do have this exact plan, A3, within the plan set.
What sheet is it?
This is sheet C102.
All right,
So perhaps we won't mark this one,
we don't have to mark it.
so that way you don't have to have as many boards. All right, perfect. All right, so then, let me sit back down in a second, but let me show you one more thing, and this is the residential property. The site currently has a residential property on it, and it has a very large garage. Right now, in the existing condition, this residential driveway exists, although it has a means to come across and get to the state highway. In our approvals with DOT, they were trying to get us to limit access and define this driveway. So right now, what we've done is we've revised this driveway so that you can only access it from Amboy Road, and we've defined the access for the garage, storage area, warehouse area. We will talk about the use as we go on. We'll have Christine Cafone talk about that a little bit more, but really what the applicant's looking to do is something along the lines of a small office with like a plumbing supply, electrical supply. So basically, a small parking area servicing that for the garage space that exists on the site. So that's how the site's oriented. I'm going to sit back down and we can go through the letter. Talking to this.
Yeah, you can talk into that. And you want to touch on the letter dated August 28th from Environmental Resolutions? We can go through. First, let's just introduce the variances. We've already touched on that there is a use variance because there are two principal structures, and the residential use is not a permitted use in the zone. But there are several bulk variances for existing uses, which I'm going to have Jackie just provide some introductory testimony on.
Okay. Can you hear me on this mic, or do I need to use the other
No, we
mic?
can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, so what I was going to do is just go point by point through the letter, if that's okay with you, Mr.
Go right
Chairman? Okay. So the first section in the letter is the variance section. This, as mentioned, requires a D1 use variance for the current residential use. The use that's being proposed in the garage is actually an approved use. You're going to hear that testimony from the applicant's planner, Christine Cafone, but I'm just going to touch on those variances now, just so you're aware of what the variances are. The applicant also requires a D1 use variance to permit multiple principal uses on the property. There are two principal uses proposed, and Christine Cafone is going to also testify on that. Requires a minimum lot area to be an acre. The project site is 0.35 acres. This is an existing non-conforming condition. And again, Christine will testify on that. Minimum front yard to be 15 feet from a front yard setback, 15 feet from a state highway. We're not changing the front yard setback. It's an existing condition, and it's an existing nonconformity. All variance testimony will be provided by Christine Cafone. Next in the letter, front yard setback, 15 feet from all other roads. Amboy Road, the applicant does not propose to change the front yard setback from its current condition, which is 7.8 feet, but this is an existing nonconformity. And this ordinance requires a minimum side yard to be 25 feet. We do not propose to change the side yard, which is 12.02 feet. This is another existing nonconforming condition. The additional variances that we will touch on, the additional waivers that we will touch on, the ordinance requires a parking stall of 10 by 20. We're proposing 9 by 18. 9 by 18, I know this isn't a residential site, but that's a typical size parking stall. Unfortunately, if we had more room, we would propose the 10 by 20. What we're trying to do is get 3 parking spaces for the small office. The ordinance requires backup areas to have a depth of 10 feet. So what we've done is I've brought turning templates. I can give those turning templates to your engineer so that he can see them. We can accommodate the turning template for that last parking space, and I can provide those to you. I have them here if you'd like them now. It's up to you.
I'll take it, yeah.
Give me 1 second, please. I just brought these ones for the engineer. Two. Just these two.
It's the same one, right?
One's for a,
This will be A3?
A3 is the template?
there are two different templates. One is for an SUV and one is for a passenger car.
The template plan, one is
So A3 is
SUV.
turning radius for an SUV.
Yes. And A4 is for a passenger car. Okay, I'm going to keep going. As you will notice on the turning templates, they can make the turn. The SUV does overhang. The tires come the whole way back, but it can back out and make its way out of the space.
I mean, the only thing we were thinking, I'll certainly take a look at that. The only thing we were thinking is, and we're talking about the ADA space,
Yes.
is that it's possible to just, I know there's some adjustments as far as your ramp and all that goes, but to basically flip the loading zone and the space, and that would allow
Okay, we
a
can do
car
that.
that's parked in the, you know, that way that gives them that automatic 8-foot area to sort of back out.
I have no problem doing that. I can do that as well. The next item was the loading zone, requiring a waiver for the loading zone. I wanted to point out that the apron in front is over 10 feet by 60 feet, although as for the way that they would have to turn in, I think it would still require the waiver, correct? So we are seeking that waiver, although we do have an area that they can pull in.
And I'm assuming no tractor trailers will be delivering on site?
No.
And you'll agree to that prohibition?
No, we would agree to that. So the last comment had to do with sidewalk, and that was the reason that we brought the exhibit to show that the abutting site on Amboy Road does have sidewalk, but if we were to extend it across this property on Amboy Road, as you would see, there's no sidewalk on either side of the street or in anywhere else in the vicinity. I didn't know whether you wanted to encourage the people walking up to the highway or not. There was no real place for them to go after that. So, you know, we were asking for a waiver for that, but, you know, we're willing to hear what, you know, what the opinions are.
We'll see what Mr. Wan has to say about that. Well, not right now, but when we get to it.
And then the applicant should be prepared to testify regarding the discrepancies between the reports. So what that's about is that I think that you wanted to hear about the use. Warehouse versus storage wasn't really defined in the ordinance, so we're going to explain to you what the use is. What we did on our plans is for parking purposes, we used the more conservative, which was warehouse, because that gave us more conservative parking numbers, more conservative traffic numbers, and you'll hear about that from the other professionals as well. So in abundance of caution, we used the more conservative for all of our calculations, because really it's what the applicant's looking for is a use that's similar to a plumbing supply or electrical supply, so that those supplies that they're storing in the back, is that storage, is that warehouse? You'll hear from our planner regarding that so that we can clarify for you what that use should be called. A gets into whether there's 2 driveways or 3 driveways. There's 3 because there's the 2 on Amboy Road and then the one that was approved by the minor access, which is an existing, we just more defined it on the state highway. The drainage report, there is no addition proposed, so that will be removed from the drainage report. There's certainly never been an addition proposed. And then the community impact statement, states garage/storage. That's the testimony that you'll be hearing from the planner on. The type of deliveries expected, as previously mentioned, we're not expecting anything bigger than like a truck, at most a box truck if it pulled into the front, but we're not looking, we would certainly not be looking at tractor trailers, and the applicant would accept that as a condition. Type of refuse and recycling to be collected. There's no dumpster shown. The applicant's proposing to store the refuse and recycling in the garage area. They're not looking to generate a lot of refuse, so they are seeking to hold that within the garage area. As for number 14, the NJDOT permit, yes, we will provide a copy of the permit. We have an approved permit and approved permit plans. We will certainly provide a copy of that. We updated the zoning table. We will submit that on the final plans. As for that triangular area that we discussed, we did submit the plans to the county, and we submitted the plans to DOT. Nobody requested a dedication. It wasn't that the applicant was opposed to it. It's just that was built on top of, the way it was built has existed that way, and nobody's asked him for a dedication for it. So ultimately, that's the
Do you have a
way-
letter from the county?
I don't,
We reached out to the county. We got approval from the county.
That's what I'm saying, you have
Yeah.
an
We have an
approval?
approval.
Okay.
We have an approval, but I know Sal reached out to Lentino this week to try to see if we could get that letter before today. He said he would try, but we haven't gotten a copy
All
of
right,
it yet.
but, all right, so your representation is you do have an approval from the county?
Yes.
Okay, fine,
I have not seen the letter.
Okay.
But I did talk to him.
all right.
Who has seen it?
The,
the letter? No.
no, we haven't,
No, I've not.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Deanna Drum for the record. I did receive very late today a letter from Middlesex County. They actually sent it to Dawn. They actually emailed me basically what the conditions of the approval is. I can forward that to the applicant tomorrow morning. If you want to take a look at the letter tonight, you're more than welcome.
Ms. Drum, anything out of the ordinary?
Nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, there is the one, there's probably three things. One, I'm probably getting above her testimony, but the access closest, on Amboy Road, closest to Route 34, the county is asking that to be restricted to a right-in, right-out with a mountable island. They are asking for 5-foot wide sidewalks along Amboy Road. And the one thing that may impact the Route 34 driveway in regards to operations is they are asking for a slight easement line
Okay,
from Amboy Road along Route 34.
okay.
They were the three main things that I noticed.
Come back to you. Do me a favor.
Yes.
Just before we continue on. Please point out the three accesses on
Sure.
either one of those, probably on the, what's that, A2 over there?
this right here,
Is that A2?
well, we were going to mark it A3, but then you have.
It's part of the plan? Okay. Okay. Yep.
Let me grab the mic so that.
Just so everybody's clear, you said there's three accesses, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So on Amboy Road for the residential, this is one. For the 400 square foot office right here and storage area, there's this access right here
On Amboy.
on Amboy. And then there's the existing driveway access that exists on the state highway, which goes to the front of the
I'm familiar with
garage.
the building, but what I'm saying is it now, is there going to be curbing on 34, right?
On 34, yes, this will be
Where exactly is the entranceway?
right here.
It's that wide?
Yes, it's that wide. It's 61 foot wide.
So there's three, and the residential access is only on Amboy Road?
Yes.
If you come in that driveway, can you access the rest of the property, or will there be curbing on that inner area?
There is curbing because DOT didn't want the access to go straight through.
Thanks. Do any board members have any questions about that? I just wanted to get, so everybody knows where the three are. Thank you. You can continue on. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No, no
I thought it
problem
was
at
a
all.
good time.
So I hadn't seen that letter before the sidewalk comment. So it sounds like sidewalk's been requested on Amboy
Right.
Road, but we would ask to not provide it on the state highway. We would have to go back to DOT for one, and two, I don't think there's any other sidewalk along the state highway. Number 17, the required building setback lines, we have no problem showing that envelope on the site plan. That will be provided for the final plans. They asked for a stop bar. We have no issue providing a stop bar.
Stop sign.
And a stop sign, we have no problem with that. Number 19, but I think on 18 it said if the board's traffic consultant wanted it for the 3 spaces. I think they deferred to the traffic consultant. So if she wants it, we're willing to provide it. I didn't know whether you wanted it.
I'm sorry.
Number 18 actually defers to whether or not the board's traffic consultant would want it for the 3 parking spaces.
Yeah, I think that's a condition also of the
Okay.
county approval. Yes.
Okay, then we have no issue providing it. The 19 says to revise the detail. We have no issue revising the detail to clarify the sidewalk in front of the ADA parking space. Number 20 asked for additional grades for the ADA space. We have no issue providing additional grades for the sidewalk or the ADA space. The location of the ADA parking sign, we have no issue providing that. We'll provide that on the final plans. Number 22, those cisterns are no longer in use. I went in, opened them, looked at them, and I also asked the applicant. So those are no longer in use. Those will be abandoned, and I'll indicate that on the final plans.
And details and notes about the
Yes.
process to be followed for abandoning them?
Sure, yes. Number 23, no exterior lighting details. We weren't proposing any lighting, but if you would like us to propose lighting on the garage, we can certainly do that.
I think we need some verification that the minimum lighting requirements are met, the township
Sure.
requirements are met. So either a lighting plan showing that the requirements are met, or a light, if there's existing lighting on the site that you feel meets the requirements, then you can do a light test.
Okay, so we will either do a light test or we will provide the photometrics for new lights.
That's acceptable.
We have no issue relocating the mailbox. Number 25, no signs are currently proposed at this time. And then once the applicant gets a tenant, he'll go back for zoning approval for that, correct? To the
Correct.
zoning officer.
Correct.
The traffic report discusses curbing to identify the driveway access. I think it was just the way it was drawn on the AutoCAD. We'll certainly increase the curb return to show the curb shown the whole way. 27, we have no issue with showing site triangles. We'll add the site triangles and add those notes to the plans. We've revised the ADA details. We'll submit those with the final plans. We added the note for thermoplastic. We'll add that to the final plans. No new drainage is proposed. We had initially looked at it, and so that's why those details were on there. We ended up doing the calcs and didn't need them, so all of those details will be removed. No dry wells or anything are proposed. 31, same thing, no dry wells proposed. We're fine with, getting MUA, although no new services are proposed. They're all existing, but we have no issue seeking that.
Yeah, just something
Yeah.
from the MUA saying
Yep.
that they've reviewed it.
We have no issue getting comments from the fire marshal. And then, other than that,
That one. Don't look there.
His area.
Not his.
sorry.
And then number 36.
Yeah, he didn't want to hear. Not mine.
We'll provide the SCS plan,
He works for Rapids.
and 36, a note will be added to the final plans. So I believe that's all the comments, but
That's my letter. Thank you very much. I'll see you next month.
One question about the refuse.
Yeah, I
Mr.
was gonna
Doherty,
say,
yeah.
I was gonna wait till the chairman asked for our opinion on that.
Well, I was waiting for it to finish, and then I was going to go to you, Mr. Dargy. Are you done, man, at this
Yes.
point? Mr. Dargy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Fleur did an excellent job going through my letter, so I don't have to talk that much as I like to talk. The two things I do have noted here are the sidewalks and the refuse. First, about the refuse, I understand that the refuse will be contained inside the garage. I have a question about the process of actually removing it. I mean, is it going to be a private hauler that's going to come and take it off the site? Is that how it's going to work?
yes, private hauler.
So there won't be any,
Yes, private hauler.
okay. And then I'm always a little loath to not have a trash enclosure because there's always concern, especially with uses like this, about outside storage. If the board, feels that it's this is something they can accept, I think we have to condition the approval on wording about having no outside storage, no refuse outside, and that it's obviously a private hauler and all that, just to make sure, just to protect the board, and so that the zoning officer has something to point to if they get called out to the site, if there's some issue.
That's okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Anything else, Mr.?
Yes, I agree with Rakesh, because we often have challenges with outdoor storage on commercial property, so I would make that as, I would request the board to make it as a condition of approval as well.
So there won't be any kind of storage or refuse, like if you have a contractor, a plumbing contractor, or whoever is using this facility, a lot of times they try to use as much of the garage as they can for their business. So there won't be any storage of any trash outside.
There's not going to be any outside storage, and we'll agree to that condition.
All right, great. Sidewalks is a little bit trickier. We've had this conversation here and at the planning board a couple of times about this, because there's always that whole thing about it's a chicken and egg kind of thing. You know, there's no sidewalk there. There will be once you do it. This area in particular, and Ms. Savant has an opinion on it as well. You know, the EDO is something that we've been sort of working on for a while, and it's kind of an important thing to have sidewalk in this area. I know Ms. Fleur and I had a conversation very briefly yesterday about it, and the applicant's position is that there's no existing sidewalk, so therefore they'd prefer to not. The two options are that we ask them to put it in and make it a condition of approval. The other option is that we ask the applicant to post a cash amount for when the township does decide to put sidewalk in. I've always been in favor of putting sidewalk in as opposed to holding money. I'll let Vina speak to it as well.
Since the property is within the EDO zone, I would highly recommend the applicant to put in the sidewalk, because we have a vision for EDO. We have been working very hard to improve that area, and I have few more things to share with the board, and I think when I go into that, I feel sidewalks would be important on both roads. So I would really recommend having that connectivity, pedestrian connectivity.
So if we're in favor of putting in the sidewalks on Amboy Road, but if we do agree to install sidewalks on 34, we have to go back to the DOT for their approval. So we would agree to Amboy, but we would request the contribution on.
So,
Well, the county's actually requiring you to do it on Amboy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So actually, if you may, I wanted to talk a little bit about NJDOT's plan for this area. And I think this is the right time, since we're talking about sidewalks, the intersection. I remember when the applicant came in with a waiver request. I know the board had a lot of discussion. They had a lot of concerns. This intersection has had many accidents in the past, and at that time, the board asked me to look at it carefully. I reached out to Nicole, the township engineer, because she was involved with DOT in this more. I came in much later, so I've had conversations with her. Kim, can you please put in the first exhibit? So this is the aerial view of that intersection, and as you can see, currently on Amboy Road, there is a right out going north on Route 34, and then there is a left out. What happened in 2004, the township actually reached out to NJDOT with a project need statement for improvement on this intersection. And there was a plan created for that. The DOT agreed with what we were proposing. Can you put in Exhibit 2? Thank you. This was the original plan for this intersection, and as you can see, the original plan included creating a cul-de-sac at Amboy Road. So the traffic on Amboy Road could go on to 34 only through the new roadway that was created right next to the residential home that is in there. Apparently, when the storage place came in front of the board, for approvals, they were asked to dedicate a portion of their property so that this roadway could be put in and could be aligned with Morristown Road, and it would be a signalized intersection. And NJDOT was on board with it. This project was in their list, but then it's a process. It's a multi-step process. So once the township reaches out to DOT with a project need statement, they accept it. There's a budgeting phase. Then you go through the environmental review. Then it's the concept. After the concept, you move on to preliminary design phase. Then it's the final phase, and finally, construction begins. But this whole process takes approximately 10 to 12 years. In 2004, after the economy tanked, we didn't hear back anything on the project. In 2015 or 16, somewhere around that time, we were notified that this project was pulled off the list and was not going to be considered anymore. That's when the township engineer, the assistant township engineer, had also received an invitation to participate in a concept review for the pavement rehabilitation program, which was also run by NJDOT. So with Nicole coordinating with the community involvement officer and DOT, this intersection was put in the pavement rehabilitation program. Can you put in the slide 3?
Before we go to these slides, Ms. Savant, these are not exhibits that are before this board.
No, this is just for information purposes.
Then I think we need to mark these exhibits as township documents.
Sure.
All right, so let's mark, I believe the first exhibit was really your aerial, am I correct? Okay, so that was that A1?
No, it's just an aerial of the site. It was just
Oh, it's an aerial of the site offered by the township?
Yes.
All right, so let's call that one, well, we're not going to mark it A because it's not an applicant's exhibit. So let's mark it as T1. Let's mark this exhibit as T2, and then we'll mark whatever other future exhibits with the T designation.
I have one last one.
Okay.
So T3.
All right, so the exhibit that Ms. Savant was just giving testimony to was T2. Okay, fine.
Can you slide it a little bit or rotate it? Push it further, please. Yes, thank you. So now, this was the latest, wherein the township officials were invited to review this as a part of the pavement rehabilitation program. And I'll not get too much into detail, but what you can see is the striping where there is a triangular island was pulled back, and Amboy Road is suggested to be just a right out. There will be no left out on Amboy Road. Again, the storage for the left lane into Morristown Road has been increased, and then if you move this page slightly up, there has been a storage lane for left in into the storage space as well as Park Plaza to make this intersection more safer. We did receive last year a notice again saying that this has moved on to the preliminary design stage. So in the coming years, we will see this move forward, and we will see this happen, making this intersection much more safer. And I thought that because the board had concerns at that time, I just wanted to provide you with this information, although it's really not directly, it is related to the site and it is not. I mean, it is for the surrounding area and the safety concerns the board had. I think it was important to display this.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Alfieri, I guess the upshot of this is the applicant is willing to put sidewalk on 34 as well, subject to discussing this with DOT, with the indication that the township is in favor of this. So.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Can I add one thing to that?
Go ahead.
Is it okay if as the condition, because we have to have a pre-construction meeting with DOT. They actually reached out to me last week to see when that was going to happen, and I said, well, we're actually going before the board next week. So we will have a pre-construction meeting with them. We can certainly, have you at that pre-construction meeting.
Sure.
And then if they're willing to allow us to put it on there, yes. If they're going to make us go back and get a whole new permit, is it okay if we do the contribution at that point? I'm just trying to know how that condition would be written, so I know what we should do. I mean, we're happy to have the township at the pre-con.
Sidewalk too. We would prefer a sidewalk.
Yeah, I think, yeah, all right. I can't envision that the state's going to have an issue with putting sidewalks in. I mean, obviously, they're not, there's no right-of-way dedication that they're seeking at this point. Am I correct?
No.
So the sidewalk, yeah, so I can't see that being an issue. So I think if the board acts favorably on this, it's going to be with the condition of a sidewalk on 34.
That's fine.
Okay, and obviously, we know you have to put it in on Amboy.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine, okay.
They're only gonna be,
All right.
Mr. Darsh, have you finished with any of your questions?
I have.
they have to go into the place.
Let me ask one while it's still on my mind, and it has to do with this sidewalks.
I think so.
When I asked to see the 3 separate entrances, and the one in front of the larger building, not the residential, to the north,
Right.
is there a width that's going to be allowed and a width that's not going to be allowed? Is
the
there a
ac-
standard?
For the accesses?
Yeah, what
There is,
would that standard be?
well, for the residential, it's the,
I'm
12
more
12 to
concerned
16
with the
feet. But that on
commercial
34?
Yeah.
It's really up to the DOT. They sort of dictate that. It's basically, they have a requirement as far as the distance from the edge lines. So whatever you need basically to get access onto, into your property. This is kind of unique because it's garages that are facing out onto 34.
Right.
Typically, this isn't something that they would want to see happen, but it's an existing building, and it's a reuse of an existing building. So that's the reason why they'll permit it. But,
So that'll be decided at a later time, I
well, it's been decided by DOT. The applicant has a DOT permit already for the access.
So the sidewalk's going to come across that as well?
Oh, certainly, yeah. What they'll have to do is they'll have to bring the sidewalk to the driveway, basically, and then pick it up on the other side of the driveway.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, you have no further questions. You want to go, Ms. Sawant, or are you satisfied right now with this witness?
Going over that.
I just have one question. The signage, will your planner address it, or? Is there any signage
I thought
proposed?
you
That's
said-
the question.
Yeah, there's none proposed
No
at this
proposed
time.
sign.
I mean, if you have a tenant and it requires some
You will-
signage, then you'll, obviously, if it's, you know,
Comply with the zoning
conforming,
ordinance.
then fine, but if requires a variance, you'll have to come before this
Correct.
board again. Okay, that's fine.
Is that fine?
That's it.
All right.
Anything else?
That's it.
Ms. Drum, you want to be heard?
I just have one, in my review letter, I just had some items regarding construction details. I don't think you have an issue with those.
No issue at all.
Didn't think so.
Okay. Board members on my left of this witness, Mr. Scogno.
The application mentions residential dwelling. What are we doing there?
It's an existing, permission to answer. It's a existing residential structure, and it's going to remain an existing residential structure. It actually has tenants in it.
And presently now, is someone in there,
Yes,
living there?
yes.
So the office is within the,
Within the garage space,
within the
the
garage
400 square
area?
foot.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on my left? To my right? Mr. Sachs.
No, I have some questions about the use, but I guess we'll get to that.
Okay.
Right, okay, no problem.
So just so you know, there's no expansion of any of the structures. The structures are existing.
Right.
Right.
You understand that, right? Everything's staying the same way as it, okay. You got 10 minutes left. I don't know what you want to do with it.
All right, we're going to bring up Mr. Klein.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony.
Got less than 5 minutes, Lee.
I think you might be able to squeeze your testimony in 10 minutes. All right. Yes, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Lee, middle initial D as in Daniel, Klein, K-L-E-I-N. I'm principal of Klein Traffic Consulting, established in December of 2013. I have a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, as well as New York, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. I'm also a nationally certified professional traffic operations
We'll
engineer.
accept Mr. Klein's credentials, and we'll let him know that we're quick listeners.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
All right. So I'm going to be referring to my traffic engineering evaluation report dated May 21st, 2019. And as I go through it, I'm going to try to address Ms. Drum's traffic comments that she has in.
That was in the report dated August 20th.
Correct, her August 20th report, correct, yes. So I approached this as new use. I looked at it as a 2,726 square foot warehouse and a single-family home. I did the trip generation for that. I used actually the higher numbers that DOT requires, which in the formula has a constant number in it, a constant at the end of the number. So even if it was 0 square feet, there'd still be 20 or 30 trips coming in and out of the site. So the warehouse, typically warehouses have a percentage of the space is office, usually 20%. And in our case, 400 square feet of the 2,700 is about 15%. So I treated it as a warehouse, and I looked at the trip generation numbers, and we ended up in a single-family home. The peak hours totaled 31 trips in the morning peak hour, 24 trips in the evening peak hour, and 19 trips on a Saturday peak hour. So when we look at the trip generation numbers, we need to be below a certain threshold, otherwise we need DOT approval. DOT approval would be, would require if it was greater than 100 peak hour trips, which we're not. So we're not a significant increase in anything to that matter. I did go out there and do some traffic observations back in May. It was a Thursday between 4 and 6 p.m., the PM peak period. I observed the traffic on Amboy Road coming up to the intersection, stopping, looking for a gap in traffic to turn. I didn't notice any extensive queues there. The queues that I did notice were traffic coming down Morristown Road, making the right turn. Traffic seemed to flow fairly well. There's signals at, I think it's Disbrow and Cottrell, create gaps a little bit on Route 34, so there are some times when there's a little surge of traffic, and then there's some gaps in there. Then I looked at the, so again, the trip generation was less than 100. We don't require a real traffic impact study because it's less than 100. And the trip generation numbers that I use are very conservative. We're really looking at more like a handful of trips in the morning and the afternoon, depending on what the specific use is. If it ends up being a specific location for a contractor to store his equipment, he comes in the morning, loads up the truck with plumbing supplies and heads out to a job, comes back in the afternoon, reloads his truck for the next day. So we're talking a handful of trips in and out of there, even with 3 different garages, even if it was 3 different plumbers, let's say, or a plumber, electrician, and a carpenter, for example. We looked at the site distance along Route 34 and Amboy Road based on the speed limits, the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit on Amboy Road, which is a 45-mile-an-hour design speed. The recommended stopping site distance is 360 feet. On Route 34, the design speed is 55 miles an hour for a posted speed limit of 50, and the required site distance in each direction is 495 feet, and we feel that that's adequate there as well. So I think in conclusion, again, the trip generation for a site this small, 2,700 square feet of a warehouse use, a single-family home, is well below the threshold that DOT would be looking at to have any kind of an issue here. We have alternative access on Amboy Road, access onto Route 34, and access for the single-family home on Amboy Road. I feel that we've designed the site, we've tightened it up, we've established driveways where there are no driveways, we've made it a little more established for circulation and for parking. Oh, that was the other thing, parking. I think the parking requirement for the site is 5 spaces. We've got the 3 along the front for the office side, and we've got at least 2 on the single-family home. So I think we've got the 5 parking spaces that are required. 9 by 18 parking spaces is, as you heard from Ms. Floor, a typical size. Even moderate to high turnover parking spaces can be as narrow as 9 feet. So I feel that that's adequate as well. And that's my direct testimony. I think I hit most of, right?
You had no issues with any?
Yeah, and then towards the, right. So, yeah, so basically through Ms. Drum's letter, the beginning, I talked about the percentage of space that's office within the warehouse. I talked about my observations of traffic, her comment number 3. Again, the trip generation numbers, I was conservative using the DOT formulas as opposed to what would normally be 2 or 3 trips in the morning, 2 or 3 trips out in the afternoon, peak hour. We talked about sight distance and visibility. Ingress and egress. Yeah, I think that's it. And Ms. Fleur picked up on a few others. I don't know if there's anything Mr. Drum wants me to elaborate on.
Ms. Drum?
Thank you. I guess there's only 2 remaining outstanding issues on my end. One is, even if they have a DOT approval for a mini warehouse, so what they are actually asking for this board is different than a mini warehouse. So typically, when you have a DOT permit and you have what they call a change in use, you're supposed to go back and get what they call a letter of no interest. Considering that they are looking at more like a specialty trade contractor type, which is only a few more vehicles higher than, quote, a mini warehouse, according to DOT, I would lean towards not having require them for a letter of no interest, because we are talking about, maybe a few additional trips. If this was going to be, a much more intense warehousing use, I may feel differently. The other thing I think the applicant's team could probably represent a little bit more is what type of vehicles we're looking at like a trade contractor. What type of vehicles are really coming on here? Are we talking about the typical, plumber's vehicle that you come in, which are a little bit, they're larger than the SUVs, larger than passenger cars, more in line, not so much as a single unit, but they are larger vehicles. So I think maybe the applicant should consider putting a little bit more testimony on the type of vehicle that they envision, especially since I would imagine most of those type of vehicles would use the Route 34 access. There are 3 garage doors there, and they look in height not that tall. So it's not going to accommodate a tractor trailer, clearly. But I just think there's some more testimony that needs to be put on for the record.
Anything else?
No.
Any comment?
I have nothing, Mr. Klein.
You want? Mr. Sachs?
No, Mr. Klein, you want to comment on that?
Sure, I think you heard a little bit of it earlier, was that we were looking at anything like a contractor, it could be an electrician, a box truck, a van, maybe one of the Sprinter vans, a pickup truck, maybe an F-150, F-250 maybe, possibly. But I don't think we're looking at, certainly nothing articulated, and I think we'd be able to take a condition that we wouldn't go larger than whatever particular truck you might have in mind. But I think we're talking about, maybe a 30-foot long truck at the most, typically 20, 22-foot pickup
Well,
truck maybe.
can we agree on a limitation? Staff, what would your recommendation be?
What's the height of the door? They look pretty big to me.
Do we know?
9-foot doors?
9?
I've been told 9-foot doors.
What size truck would you agree to a limitation on?
Well, what's the depth of the apron we have now?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What's your actual depth of your
Of the
driveway?
The look of the driveway itself?
From the
Distance from the right-of-way to the edge of the
Well-
distance from the curb line to the
curb
door,
line to the
basically.
face of the...
It looks to me about 25 to 30 feet at the tops, because it does taper. But yeah, no, yeah, just that's pretty.
You're talking about,
It's a
22,
keen eye, these
25.
glasses. So
20.
you're going to be really limited by it to a van. Really is what it winds up being.
So 25 feet?
Standard
Yeah, 20, 22.
20 foot, 22-foot vehicles.
Yeah,
All right.
22, yeah.
Yeah,
22
You're not
foot?
going to get anything
All
larger
right.
than a van or an
All right.
F-150 kind
So
of.
22 feet?
All right, so we're going to limit any vehicles to being smaller than 22 feet?
correct.
Okay. Good, all right. All right.
Board members on my left, questions of this witness?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
You did your traffic study one day between 4 and 6.
Correct, yeah.
Do you think that was sufficient for
Yeah, because the amount of trips that,
Amboy Road and Route 34?
based on the number of trips that we think is going to be generated by the site, is a handful of trips. So there's really not going to be much of an impact
I
from...
live off that road, and I know what it is, what a hardship it is to try and get out onto 34 from Amboy Road.
Right, and we're talking about another 2 or 3...
My fire vehicle with the lights and siren on.
Okay.
People do not stop.
Right.
Has anyone discussed what's going to happen when the county and the state, because right on that triangle, when the county comes up Amboy Road and pushes all their snow, that, you know where the snow's gonna wind up? Right on that triangle. Winds up there every year. There's huge piles of snow between the state and the county.
On the triangle where? On this property?
Yes.
I'm not aware of that, that there's snow piled up on private property?
They come, the plows are facing this way.
Right.
They come right around that corner. And then when the state comes down 34, the plows are facing towards that building.
They're
There's
gonna
only
have
one
to,
place for the snow to go. It's on that property.
the applicant's gonna have to clean up their own parking lot then.
I understand
Yeah,
that, but
yeah, yeah.
Essentially, my client's going to have to maintain his parking lot.
you need to be ready for that.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Walker?
That's it.
Anybody else on my left? Mr.
One
Scoggin?
question about the home dwelling. They also have a carport, don't they, that they can park?
Just, no, I don't,
No.
There's a
Covered?
parking area there for them.
parking,
Yeah.
yeah, driveway area. I don't think it's
It's
covered.
Oh, no.
No, you said a carport, okay, yeah.
So how are they gonna be able to get in there with the vehicles on the 34 side?
They're coming off of.
They're coming off
they're
Amboy.
off of
By road.
Amboy.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a driveway coming off of Amboy.
It can only come in off Amboy. Or so the testimony was, yes.
Yeah, so the only access for the residential unit will be off of Amboy Road.
Right. Right, the driveway on Amboy Road is just for the, and there's a little ability to make a K-turn. You could park a couple cars on this part and another car there. You probably get 2, maybe 3 cars
But it's only accessed through Amboy.
through
Road.
Amboy Road.
Anybody else on my left? On my right?
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Ms. Chevalier.
I'm curious how you're counting the residential.
Microphone, please. Thank you. Turn it on. There we go.
I'm sorry. How are you using the residential parking in for the warehouse slash?
There's
No,
no
no,
proposed,
there's
no, the
separate- yeah,
residential units are going to be, the
gonna
residential
curb that whole
driveway
driveway.
is for them.
Right,
You're gonna
right.
curb that
But
driveway
when you
inside
did
so they
your
can't get
count, you counted.
Right, there's 2 for the residential and there's 3 for the,
And you think 3 parking spaces is going to be enough?
yes.
And then my next question is, when you rent it out, are the trucks, your plumbers, electricians, we don't know what, going to be able to park their cars there at night?
If they can park it inside the garage, if they have enough room in the garage,
But
because there's
that's
no
what-
outside storage.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're going to make sure that they park their vehicles only
That
on
was
the
one of our
inside.
That would be,
Conditions, no outside
we
storage.
agreed that as a condition, and that would be code enforcement that would
All
have
right,
to-
well, I want to verify too on storage, whether they consider their vehicles storage or vehicles. as in-
it would be outside
Okay.
storage, so.
Right, so they couldn't put it outside, yeah.
Anybody else, Mr. Sachs?
Mr. Chairman, I have
Go
one
ahead.
question,
Mr. Dargy.
not to take up Mr. Klein's 5 minutes that he's already used up.
Okay.
But and it's, maybe this is a question from Ms. Fleur. In the existing condition you have for the residents, their access right now comes off of the Route 34 access, right? There's looks like 2 concrete.
We're cutting that off, correct,
So
yeah.
because the plan doesn't really depict exactly what's going to happen with that sidewalk. Can we get that clarified on the plan, at least?
That angled thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to take those,
Take it out.
you're going to take those angled sidewalks off, and then
Yes.
exactly the limit of removal and all that needs to be clarified in the plans.
And restore it. I
We'll
would
show
say
that on the
restore it with
plans.
grass, Yeah.
Actually, Chairman, I do have a question for Ms. Flor too. You didn't mention anything about the landscaping. I know there were some waivers required, but can you just testify on any proposed landscaping existing?
The existing is just grass. We weren't proposing any landscaping for this use. If the board wanted landscaping, none was proposed other than grass.
I would recommend that you add some sort of landscaping along that patch where you have the rear doors, that area on Amboy Road. So
Building in Amboy Road, basically, behind the building.
Oh, the triangle, basically, that's, okay.
Right.
What's there now? Just grass?
Show me where. Okay.
Right here, triangle there, right, that area there?
Oh, that little area? That's fine.
Yeah,
Are you
we'll
okay?
agree to that.
Yes.
okay, thank you, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing. Rakesh, can you bring up the site plan? This is really more for the applicant. I noticed on your plans, and I'm trying to help you get out of DOT stuff. You look at, you're revising actually the radii at Amboy Road and Route 34, which technically puts you into a street permit at DOT. Maybe a recommendation on your end is just to tie into, is there curb there now coming around?
There's no curbing there now.
We have to put in curb.
Was that part of your DOT? That was part of your, okay,
Yes.
that's fine.
Good, Ms. Drum?
I'm fine, thank you.
How long's Ms. Cofone?
2 minutes.
Well, the last guy said it was 5 minutes.
She's 2 minutes.
Actually,
No offense, Mr.
I have
Klein.
confidence that she'll be quick.
Mr. Klein was very concise.
Lightning
Thank you,
fast
Mr.
and
Klein.
gangster lean. That's how we like to roll our testimony.
Ms. Cofone, please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation.
It's
for the record.
Christine Nazaro, Nazzaro, Cofone, C-O-F as in Frank, O-N-E. Business address is 125 Half Mile Road, Suite 200, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701. I am the principal and owner of the Cofone Consulting Group. I've been providing professional planning consulting services for over 23 years. I've been qualified here and about 420 other boards.
Ms. Cofone is recognized by most of the board, if not all. I certainly recognize her credentials. We'll accept her testimony.
Ms. Cofone, take it
A
away.
pleasure to be back. So this is a very, from a planning and use point of view, it's a very straightforward application. The reason this board has jurisdiction is because of the two uses on one lot issue and the fact that the existing residential use is not a permitted use in the EDO-1 zone. So the commercial aspect of it, the garage, is actually consistent and expressly permitted in the EDO-1 zone. So when you look at the list of zoning uses, mini warehousing, including self-storage and flex warehousing limited to 15,000 square feet, as well as mini warehousing and office for electricians, carpenters, plumbers, woodworking, and cabinet makers, and similar trades limited to 15,000 square feet. So that is what we can represent to the boards that we're desirous of occupying this building with. It would be for those types of uses which are absolutely consistent with and enumerated in the EDO-1 zone. So I think, as you heard from earlier witnesses, the subject property is occupied currently by an existing residential home. It is occupied. You can access it from 34 or from Amboy. So to the extent that the state is really making us close off that Amboy, or straight that the 34 access, this is actually a better situation for that residential use. Residential uses are not permitted in this zone, and certainly I'm sure you can see that it would be a better zoning alternative to not have them having their direct access to State Highway 34. So I do think that the site is certainly particularly suitable for the proposed uses. They exist on the property today. There are no building improvements proposed in conjunction with this application. I think the board can rely on criteria G of the land use law, sufficient space in appropriate locations for this use, as well as M, efficient use of the lands, given the fact that the improvements exist on the property today. As far as the negative criteria and the impact on the zone plan, when you look at the stated purpose of the EDO zone, it's very specific, and it states in your zoning ordinance that the goal of that zone is to accommodate market forces and vision for stimulating economic growth by permitting an assortment of businesses coupled with light industrial uses within the zone. The zone aims at creating small-scale, non-residential developments along the highly traversed routes that generally cater to the needs of the neighboring residential uses and Old Bridge residents. And that's exactly how we want to use this property. My client envisions using it for plumbers, contractors, those type of uses that are going to be serving the general public in the neighborhood. So I don't think that there's going to be a substantial detriment to the EDO-1 zone plan if in fact these variances are granted. Ms. Fleur testified that we are seeking some other variance relief that's really bulk variance relief relating to the lot size, the lot area. It's 0.35 acres where 1 acre is existing in the zone, is required in the zone. We also have nonconformities with respect to the setbacks. We're not impacting those either positively or negatively. I understand your professional's request for additional landscaping. I don't disagree with that. The site could benefit from some additional curb appeal, and I think the installation of landscaping is probably a good thing and would help us out on the negative criteria, the curb appeal of the site. So I think that the board could certainly require that as a condition of approval if you were so inclined. So I do think we meet our statutory grant or bear statutory proof for the grant of the D variances. The conditions on this property are primarily existing. We are not asking you to create something that doesn't exist in the neighborhood today. We're just simply asking you to allow us to use this property in such a way that I find to be consistent with the EDO 1 zone and the specific stated purpose. So I think we meet our burden of proof with respect to particular suitability, as well as the positive and negative criteria, and the applicant has met its burden of proof for the grant of the C and D variances.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any questions for your witness?
None.
Mr. Watt, we'll start with you.
I have no questions.
Mr. Dargy. Ms. Drum of this witness.
Thank you.
Board members to my left. To my right, Mr. Sachs.
Yeah, I have a few questions. All right, so just so we understand the use is going to be limited to electrical supply contractors, plumbing supply contractors. What I'd like to see perhaps is maybe, so we have some assurance at least that the parking is not going to be an issue here, because I agree, if it's a plumbing supply, you're not going to have retail traffic on the
Customers.
site. It's going to
Right.
be a storage area for the contractor. But perhaps we can have some type of tenancy review, just to make sure that we're complying with the uses in the EDO zone, and that, it's not going to trigger more of a parking demand on
I think certainly, right, we would want to say that we would certainly at this time are contemplating only those uses that would be permissible in the EDO 1 zone.
All right, but I'd like to see a tenancy review on, is there a tenant in there now?
No.
All right, so whatever prospective tenants come in, if they meet that goal, I just want to make sure that there's a tenancy review by our professional staff.
But they don't have to come back to the board for that.
Come back to the board, it's done administratively. If it turns out that we feel that there's an intense activity, then it will have to come back to the board.
Such as if they open up a mechanical shop within.
Perhaps.
Are you all right with that?
Okay.
That's fine.
All right. And the other thing, too, is I want to make sure that the office use is related to the warehouse use. In other words, I don't want you renting out the office to somebody else and having another tenant utilizing the warehouse, the storage area, the garage. Okay.
Acceptable as well,
That's
Mr.
acceptable.
I'm
Sachs.
satisfied with that. That was really my primary concern, which I wanted to voice earlier, but I wanted to hear from
It's
Mr.
understood.
Fong.
I can understand that.
Reasonable request.
Okay. Anything else?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses?
No other witnesses.
Any final comments, Mr. Alfieri?
Nothing.
All right, for the board, any questions before we go for a vote?
Public.
All right, I'm asking you if you have any first.
Oh, no.
Okay. This is matter. Go ahead. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I was doing right now. This is matter 6-19Z, 98 Ann Street LLC, located at 314 Highway 34, or commonly called the intersection of 34 and Amboy Road. This is for, they're not changing the building at all, but it's for use, and it's a preliminary and final major site plan, residential, non-residential. Anyone want to be heard in this matter? Please raise your hand. I see no one has. I'll close the public portion. One discrepancy I saw, Ms. Sawant, you say it's a D2, and then Mr. Dargy says it's D1.
I defer to Ms. Long.
The two reports, one says D2, one says D1. D1 and D2? Okay. All right, so Mr.
I have it in the text, in the planning comments.
Okay.
I say that two principal uses are not permitted, and they're proposing two. So I cover it in the text, but not in the table, so it's D1.
It's a D1.
So it's D1, we don't need a vote twice.
No, it's a
Okay.
D1,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, Mr. Alfieri? All right, the board members understand for the use?
Yeah.
All right, someone want to move the D1 variance?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Any vote?
Mr. Walker, if he wasn't here, if he was not here for the entire evening, then he cannot vote.
Yes.
Yes. Then we have the.
C variances.
The Cs, we enumerate them. Parking spaces, no. This is existing. What's the lot size, right?
Lot area, front yard setback, side yard setback.
Most all existing and
And loading.
non-conforming.
Right, right.
And waiver on the parking stall,
Correct.
correct?
Yep.
Everybody understand? Someone want to move the bulk variances?
And the design waiver, we could do it all at once.
Okay, and the design waiver as well. So I'll move it.
Motion?
Ms. Gilduff, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Chevalier, roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Preliminary.
Preliminary. I'll move it.
Second it.
Roll call.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Final major site plan. I'll move it.
Second.
Second, Mr. Stoner, roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we good?
We're good.
We're good. Mr. Alfieri, thank you and all your professionals this
Thank you,
evening for your
Chairman.
presentation.
Thank you, members of the board. Thank you,
Oh, your
professionals.
your colleagues 10 minutes.
I do. I do. Thank you, Larry.
Problem.
If you can get away with just giving them time, you're good, you're doing pretty good.
I owe.
Is that on the record or off the record?
Hey, Kim, here, that's,
Right, briefly, are you going to do the next one too, as well? We're going to stand in recess 5 minutes. It will not be taken away from the application. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
here.
All right, next matter for the evening is 35-18Z, Dennis Korkowski, State Highway Route 35. Upgrade existing facility, parking lot, addition to building, 2,913 square foot. Preliminary and final site plan, C&D variances. This is in the SD1 zone. Mr. Shahir? Shire, representing the applicant, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bernard Shire from Convery and Shire. I represent the applicant Dennis Korkowski, who is the principal of the owner of the property, Route 35 Old Bridge LLC. The property is located on Route 35. It is Block 1051, Lot 6.11. The property is an existing but vacant vehicle repair shop, which is in truly rundown condition. And my client's proposal is to maintain the use with a total renovation with an addition and a parking lot and striping a parking lot and maintaining the existing apartment for the caretaker. The variances which are listed on the report are all existing conditions. My client proposes nothing that will create any exacerbation of any bulk or use violation. And with me this evening is Mr. Chet DiLorenzo, who is a licensed professional engineer, professional planner, and surveyor, and also Cesar Bustamante, who is the architect who designed the plans. I also have the construction person, Mr. Araventinos, who can testify if the board needs any information as to anything that is actually being constructed. If there are no preliminary questions, I would be ready to proceed.
Go right ahead, Mr.
Thank you.
Shire.
Mr. DiLorenzo?
Lorenzo, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the
My
record.
name is Chester DiLorenzo, DiLorenzo. I'm the principal of Midstate Engineering Incorporated. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey in 1983, planner in 1983, land surveyor in 1987. I've appeared before this board in the past, of course, but not recently.
We'll accept Mr.
Thank you, Mr.
Lorenzo's
Chairman.
credentials.
Thank you. Mr. DiLorenzo, you were hired by Mr. Korkowski to prepare the engineering site plan for this project, correct?
I was, sir.
And in doing so, I assume you visited the property on numerous occasions and took notice of the existing conditions.
I have.
Could you please, just briefly for the board, describe the condition the property is in presently?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go back about 30 years. This was Hicks Auto Body Shop years ago. Hicks must have fallen on hard times, let the building get run down. The Township of Oldbridge reacquired the property due to failure to pay taxes, and eventually sold the property in a tax sale to the applicant. The applicant is also in the auto body business. He wants to repair vehicles. He wants to rehab the existing the existing structure. The structure is in very, very poor condition. However, structurally, it's is adequate. The back wall, which is the westerly wall, is in disrepair and falling apart. He wanted to rehab the entire building, plus put a 2,913 square foot addition to it. He wants to maintain the caretaker apartment, which is above the most northeasterly corner of the building. It's only about 800 square feet. And he wants to construct a parking area, lighting, landscaping, refuse, and a detention basin, I apologize, for stormwater management, which discharges out to the NJDOT system on Route 35.
All right, Mr. DiLorenzo, could you please tell the board, is the client doing anything to exacerbate any of the existing violations on the property?
He is not.
And with regard to the application, have you had an opportunity to review the report of the township engineer consultant dated September 30th, 2019, and the township planning consultant dated September 30th, 2019?
Yes, I've read the reports.
First, referencing the engineer's report, have you gone through the issues raised by the engineer?
I have. I know the time is short, so I can hopefully sum it up for the board that we have a lot area variance because we have a .76 acre parcel in a 1 acre zone. We have a front yard setback variance because we have an existing building that's 15 feet from the front right-of-way line where 50 feet is required. We have a side yard variance because an existing building is .9 feet from the northerly property line where 25 feet is required. And we have a sign variance because the existing sign is in front of the building some 3.4 feet off the front right-of-way line. And that's the extent of the variances. There are also some waivers I'd like to get into, just again briefly. There was some discrepancy between the architect's plan and our plans. Our survey, I think, resolved that. I think we need to still do some work to clean the plans up. We had a request for a trash enclosure. I failed to put a roof on it in the detail. I intend to do that. To be quite honest and jump ahead, I intend to comply with all of the requested revisions that the engineer and planner have made. I just want to go through the waivers so the board understands where I want to argue it. Item 3, there's an ordinance requirement of 1.0 foot candle contours for these pole lights. These are 15-foot high lights. I'm requesting a waiver to get a 0.5 foot candle contour. We don't need that type of lighting. The security lights are motion activated, and contiguous to this parcel on the south are 3 dwellings on Greenwood Drive. And I know personally, I would not want to have 1 foot candle light in my backyard when I want to enjoy my backyard when this place is closed. So I'm requesting to downsize that, shadow box it, so that we can have adequate light and not bother our neighbors. The rest of the items, I believe I've agreed to do. I want to maintain the existing sign, which is in the right-of-way out front on Route 35, and just reface it and make it appear nice. It's a structurally adequate pole. There's no reason to tear that down. I believe I also need to generate some documentation. The engineer correctly asked that since we know there's a 15-foot sewer right-of-way in front of the building, to please prove it. There's a pipe there. I cannot find a deed granting the property to OBMUA, but we don't want to argue with it. We're going to keep it there. So effectively, I will do what he's requested me to do, but it's not shown in this plan. We've put some heavy landscaping in between us and the residences. To our rear, we have another commercial use. I didn't feel it was necessary to buffer between that use. And essentially, we're looking to conform with the reports and to put this back onto the tax rolls and have a nice building. I think the architect's got a nice presentation for you to show you how nice it could look.
So very, very briefly, since the applicant is only making a rundown building acceptable and attractive, he is not creating any new variances, nor is he increasing any of the existing conditions that required variances on the property. Can you testify as a planner that this can all be done without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantial impairment of the zone plan and zoning ordinance?
Yes, I can. I would indicate that none of the proposals here exacerbate the current master plan or zoning standards in the Township of Old Bridge.
Other questions?
Ms. Swan?
Can you just this because more, which are on page 4 of the planning report. There is a variance for parking within the buffer. All of them are existing, but we still have them. So parking within the buffer, no building or parking is allowed, and the building and the parking is within the required buffer. The buffer along principal arterial is 75 feet, yours is less than 75 feet, so that's an existing nonconformity. Buffer along residential zone, 50 feet required, you have 30 feet, so it is existing nonconforming. Then you have the loading space, which is, although you have a loading area, it is not, it does not comply with the.
Mr. President, we intend to comply.
Okay. And then the refuse storage, there's a requirement that there be a 6 feet high fence with evergreen tree plantings, and I believe your refuse area doesn't have landscaping around.
That's correct. I understood that if I put a roof over it, I didn't have to have the landscaping, because I think the landscaping would get abused that close to the building.
I don't think the ordinance specifically acknowledges that. I mean, I understand the logic, but I didn't.
I believe I read that in the engineer's letter, but whatever, I'm not disagreeing with anything. If
We'll comply if it's necessary.
Whatever it may be, you'll comply.
whatever we can,
Perfect.
we will comply with.
So as
your
the page
staff has been
4
very good with us.
of the variances listed in Table 3, the bulk variances, you'll comply with all.
Yes.
The last question, I know I commented about it with the pylon sign. Would you consider having a monument sign, or is it your preference to retain the existing sign and reface it? Because I took a look at this sign. It's a framework, and I know the building is much closer to the street right of way. Typically, with pylon signs, they are proposed along highly traversed routes like Route 9, 18, where you're traveling at much higher speed, as well as at gas stations. Here, you have the building closer to the street right of way. You have a wall sign on the building. Visibility or identification purposes is not going to really get impacted if you have a monument instead of a freestanding. So could you just elaborate on that?
I appreciate that. I went over that with the applicant, and his indication was that as it's an existing sanitary sewer easement, that there's a pipe down there, the existing pylon sign has its footings already installed. We're just looking to take the sign down, the face of the sign down, sandblast the pole, paint it, and put a new one up there. We're looking to do as little disturbance there as possible. I do appreciate the ordinance, the fact if I was doing a new sign, I would do a monument sign out of the easement, the proper setback distance, but this is an existing sign. I'm just looking to reface and continue using it.
I understand. I just wanted you to testify.
Less disturbance on the area and more use in the area, correct?
Exactly.
Is that okay?
Yes,
All right. Anything else?
that's it.
Mr. Dargy, anything for this witness?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant has agreed to really comply with just about all the comments in our review letter. We do have a review letter dated October 1st, 2019. We did meet, this was actually our second review. We met, Ms. Swan and I both met with the applicant's professionals after the initial reviews, and the plans have been revised in accordance with those reviews. There's still some outstanding issues, mostly details, which we can iron out with the applicant's professionals. The design waiver with regard to lighting, I have no objection to that. I think it makes sense to grant that to ease the burden on adjoining property owners. And there is security lighting, usually on facilities like this, they are motion activated and all that. So I have no objection to that either. And then all the revisions that we're requesting are mostly technical kind of revisions, which won't affect, or should not affect, I should say, the actual layout and what the board is actually seeing here tonight.
I would probably agree that most of the board members, I would think, would probably not want the lighting on the other, the residential homes, so
Yes,
I would agree with that. We'll see if the board agrees, but I would think that would be a good idea. Anything else, Mr. Dargy?
I have nothing
Ms.
further.
Drummond, you in on this one?
I am not.
Okay. You're folding, that's it? Okay. You have any other,
I would just-
let me ask the board members for questions, okay? Sure. On my left, board members?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
On Fire Marshal Garrett's report, I see there's 3 unsatisfactory items. Are you willing to comply with those?
Yes.
3? Thank you.
As noted in the 7/19/2019 memo, correct? Is that what you're referring to? Anything else, Mr. Walker?
That's it.
To my right, Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, just one question, and I guess it's to Mr. Dargy. You made some comments about stormwater management. You're looking to get some type of revised report from them?
Yes, yeah, and we did meet with the applicant. I just think it was more of a time crunch because there's some testing that we need to have done, which takes a little time to get scheduled. The information that we have, I think, is sufficient to say that the design of the stormwater won't change. It may change maybe the shape a little bit of the basin, but in general, the design shouldn't change.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. And then, Mr. DiLorenzo, you're testifying as a planner as well?
I am.
I know you kind of gave me a little limited testimony on planning.
He's going to continue.
Are you going to continue, or let me ask you this, and I'll throw it to Ms. Savant also. She's mentioned something about there being conditional use as well.
Yes.
So maybe we can hear some testimony as to that, and maybe you can enlighten us a little bit more with respect to your D2 testimony.
Well, as Mr. Korkowski acquired the property, it had an existing auto body shop with a second-story existing residential use for a watchman or a caretaker, and we're looking to continue the conditional use aspect of it, where we're going to have the residential on the commercial property, again, as a caretaker, not as a for-rent apartment. We're looking to not violate the master plan. We're not looking to change the D2. The benefits, in our opinion, outweigh the detriments. We'll have a brand-new building here with someone to make sure that there's no damages, which is continues along the lines of us not wanting to exacerbate lighting or other attention-grabbing items at this property that's going to reflect on the backyards of the contiguous neighbors. So with the person in the building at all times, we feel that the site would be secure.
We are not increasing the size of the apartment in any way, shape, or form,
Not at
correct?
all.
And a caretaker watchman apartment is an accepted accessory use for these types of uses, correct?
That is correct, sir.
What's the nature of the caretaker watchman, just so the board's clear?
He is going to make sure at night, when there is no work being done, that the property is safe, and if there are any problems, he will immediately contact the police
All right, so
or
he-
whomever is,
He's not a tenant then?
well, it's part of his job is living there.
I understand that. So
Yeah.
does he pay rent?
He will have an offset.
Okay, all right, so he'll have an offset on rent. So what you're saying then is this residential apartment will not be rented out to anyone
Correct.
other than a caretaker or a
Correct.
watchman for this property?
Yes.
I understand it, sir.
All right.
Can you elaborate on D3? Because I know when we met too, we had this discussion that will there be any sort of outdoor storage of vehicles? Because we kind of discussed and sorted out the D2, but I wasn't sure, since it's a auto repair garage, and the zoning officer and I have had numerous discussions on this, not on this particular site, but on other instances, and we notice that there are usually vehicles stored on the site. Now, one of the condition of the auto repair garage is that you cannot, so no parts or partially dismantled motor vehicles may be stored. And how does that work? Because a D3 may or may not be required based on your testimony.
I am not sure whether it is required or not. There will be some vehicles, we discussed that there's going to be, I think it's 7 or 8 bays total, that some of these vehicles, when parts need to be ordered, may be pushed out, put into a parking stall while the use inside is being worked upon. They may be stored outside for a short period of time, and we did discuss this at the Technical Review Committee meeting, that this may generate an additional variance or waiver for short-term storage of a vehicle while a part is being waited for. And I appreciate you bringing it up because I forgot to mention it in the draft.
In which case, I would recommend that you ask for a D3 as well, so that you're covered, because we have been closely monitoring Route 35 area for, violations on outdoor storage. So it makes it easier once there is a formal resolution of approval for that outdoor storage.
I'd be happy to. I mean, essentially, we're looking to get a variance for the short term, and we'll have to define that. I'm sure the attorneys will. Storage of vehicles on site where parts are not available when they're being worked upon, to be pushed out of the building so the building can be utilized. And then when the parts arrive, we can put it back in. But again, we're going to come up with the time, I would imagine the board would.
This is auto body and mechanical?
It's mostly auto body. There is some mechanical, but mostly auto body.
What happens with them a lot is, I think some side projects come up, and there's a nice old car that somebody takes and it sits outside for 2 years, and it really never gets to completion.
Avoid that.
Well, one would hope. But that's what's going to take place here, basically.
Yes.
I basically would come to you if I had an accident.
That's correct.
Did I read somewhere in here that the owner also tows for the township?
He does.
Where does he tow the vehicles to?
He has other facilities in other towns, but he would be towing them here for Old Bridge.
And where would they be stored?
They would be, accident cars would be brought in and put in the building.
Well, would he tow for criminal arrest?
I don't know that.
I would assume, if he's a tower for the township? Okay, wait, you got to be sworn, but,
He'll
yeah, I mean, you could,
testify
you
what
could briefly tell us
Yes.
basically what he does. I'm worried that it's going to be an outdoor storage for impounded vehicles. Or I question.
No,
will
you
it
can,
be?
you can
Maybe
put,
it will
you
not
can
be.
put
I don't
that,
know.
you can
That's
put that
the
in the
main reason.
resolution. Mike, I just
Okay.
spoke to my client. There will be no outdoor storage of impounded
Wants to
vehicles.
testify, he can. If he doesn't, that's fine too.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's actually one of the things we spoke with the applicant's professionals
It's-
about at our
He has-
meeting with
he
them,
has-
is that was a concern that Ms. Swan had, and the same concern that, I know obviously the board has. So we recommended, or we suggested that they request a D3 variance, which can then be controlled by the board through conditions, as far as you can place a condition on how long something can stay. Because it's reasonable to expect that a car that's being repaired is
May
gonna
stay
may
overnight.
stay like 2 or 3 weeks.
Sure.
But the side projects, because I know there's one place that I drive by all the time where there's this hideous pink Cadillac on huge wheels that they just park right out front, and it just stays there forever, which we don't want. So I think that's really where the remedy of requesting a D3, which can then be conditioned, comes in.
That's fine.
And that's fine.
All right, well, let's clarify. So there's not going to be any impounded vehicles stored on
Correct.
site. The only outdoor storage would be vehicles that are being worked on as part of this auto body business.
Correct.
And-
Actively, right?
Yeah, all right. And I guess the question is, how long are we going to, we want a
30
limitation on how long these vehicles can stay there.
30 days?
I'm not an auto body guy, but, I mean, does 30 days seem like a reasonable?
30 days is
30.
fine.
All right, so there's a 30-day limitation on the outdoor storage of any particular
Yes, sir.
vehicle. Okay, all right.
Pretty certain the owner understands the spirit of what
He,
what
he's,
we would like.
he certainly does, Your Honor.
Okay. You wanted to talk about the expansion of the building?
No,
You want to put anything else on about the expansion of the building?
We have the architect here just
Gonna come
to
up and do
briefly
that?
describe
Okay,
it
very good.
and show you a picture of what it's going to look like, so.
All right. Any further questions up here from the board before we release this witness? Neither are we. We'll hold you to that. Thank you, sir. You bring next witness.
Okay, he's got what I wanted to see.
Even before the application was deemed complete.
Very good. That's great. Yeah, I've done that trip. I've been there, yeah.
He knows Switzerland.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you have a good time. Oh, yeah. Switzerland's beautiful. Oh, yeah. Italy, forget it, man. Italy is the best. Sir, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional
Peter
affiliation.
Bustamante, Bustamante.
Thank you. And your affiliation, sir?
I'm a principal of our architectural studio in Red Bank.
Licensed architect? Okay.
You're a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, correct?
New Jersey, New York,
Okay.
1985.
Okay, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, Mr. Bustamante, you're the architect hired by the applicant to design the renovation of his existing building down on Route 35?
Yes.
And I see here you've got an exhibit that we put up, which is A1. Could you please advise the board, is that what the proposed use will look like?
Yes.
And could you just briefly explain what kind of condition the building is in now?
Right now, the building is in a very bad condition. It needs to be renovated. So we're proposing to reface that on Route 35 there. So you get a new facelift and addition of 2 bays and the storage and.
Could you just show the board where the addition is?
Sure. Right here. So the additional bays, and we have a man door here. And this will be a renovation of the existing property that's facing
Right.
Route 35.
And you're going to,
Can you see that, Mr. Dargy?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just go to the other side of Mr.
And use the mic if you don't mind. Yeah.
The mic?
Yeah, thanks.
So this is facing Route 35. Facing Route 35. So we're proposing to renovate the entire facade, give it a new facelift, give it a nice look, and then have the addition of the 2 additional bays on the side, giving it a nice refurbished look.
Just orient me there. The Route 35 is to the foreground on the top picture?
Yes, this will be Route 35.
Okay, thanks.
and all the construction, of course, is going to be done consistent with Uniform Construction Code and Township standards?
Yes, correct.
And any falling down portions, as have been testified to, are going to be demolished and replaced?
Correct.
I have no other questions.
The building, is that adding a second level, or is that there already?
That's existing.
It is existing? Okay. And that's where the caretaker is?
That's where the apartment is.
Okay.
I don't have anything for the
Mr.
architect.
Dargy, you don't have anything?
No.
Where'd Mrs. Swanko?
Mrs. Vaughn got a call from home, which she needed
Okay.
to.
All right, we'll move on. Mr. You're out. Still?
Still sitting it out.
You don't want to get back in? Board members to my left, questions of the architect? Or any questions about the picture?
Can you bring that forward?
Yeah, could we pass it around up here? It's a little tough to see. Anything else you want to tell us what goes around?
I mean, it's, I think we're refurbishing the entire facade, give it a nicer look, give it a better feeling for the whole Route 35 area. So, just trying to make it a nicer
From a
place.
distance, it looks like a very nice build.
Yeah, I think it'll be a nice addition to.
picture, huh? Where's the other picture? It's quite an upgrade. Ms. Chevalier?
Drive up 206?
You saw the other picture, right? The older picture? Okay.
They're all over there.
Okay, Counsel?
Mr. Chairman, that's the applicant's case.
Okay, having seen the picture and heard the testimony of the architect, do I have any board members on my left that have any questions? Are there any board members on my right?
No.
None. Any other testimony, sir?
No, sir.
I'm going to go to the public portion, okay?
Certainly.
It's matter 35-18Z, Dennis Korkowski. This is block 1051, lot 611 at State Highway Route 35. What's the closest street? Industrial? What's the closest? Industrial, right? Okay. On the southbound side, I would assume, right? Yeah. This is for upgrading facility and parking lot, addition to the building, a 2,913 square foot. Anyone here in the audience this evening want to be heard on this matter? Gentlemen, please come forward. One at a time, please. Oh, I didn't know. I thought both of you were coming up. Both of you can testify, come up, but just one at a time, please. Maybe, Counselor, could you allow him to go to that microphone? Board Attorney will swear you in, sir.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please state your name, spelling your last name, address for the record.
Martin Flows, FLOHS. What's the line?
Address.
Address, 50 Timberline Road, Bayville, New Jersey, 08721.
Thank you.
50 Timberline.
I assume, looking at your shirt, you have the flow door, that we just had an application before us recently.
Correct, I'm one of the owners.
So we're familiar with where you are. Go ahead, sir.
Well, it's right next to us. So our concern, or our questions would be, they're adding on the 2,000-foot addition on the back, equal to the side of that building, which is right against the property line, within 9 inches. So the thing is, how is it going to be addressed along that property line? Because we own both buildings there.
When you say address, what are you referring to?
So how are they going to, again, if they're going to work on the siding and all of that, on that building, they're going to have to come out to our property line.
Okay.
Right, they
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
access it. So the other thing is, in the back part of that, again, right now, we have a lot of runoff, from that from that property. It goes through our property. Just as long as that they're taking care of that, addressing that, as far as water, water.
We'll get the applicant to respond, or his attorney.
Well, actually, there's going to have to be a revised drainage report.
Right, and I'll let Mr.
Go ahead. Yep.
Actually, it's one of the things we're looking to repair with. Sorry. That's one of the issues we're looking to repair with this site plan. The water drains both ways off the property. We're going to bring all the water to the south, away from his property, put it in the detention basin, and run it out to the highway, as opposed to it right now just going whichever way it wants to.
So you're going to do some regrading back there?
Yes, we are.
To divert that flow away from the flow to our property?
We're also going to have leaders and downspouts from the building. We're going to have a manifold system bring the water away from it, so we're going to have less water going to his property.
Is the asphalt running behind that addition?
No.
What's behind that addition?
It'll be grass.
All grass? Is there going to be a different level from your property line to our property line?
No, sir. We're matching existing grades all along the property line.
All right, because again, behind that property, right, are the woods,
Mhm.
and that raises up.
It's actually, where the tree line is, it starts to come up gradually, and when it crosses the property line, it picks up
Yeah, so
more
so
severely.
the water runs down off through those woods.
It runs down off the woods onto our property, onto your property, and we're going to be bringing it into our detention basin. So we're bringing it away from your property, about 150 feet to the detention basin.
I mean, my concern again with the condition of that building, being at, even at the south side of that building, I mean, it's totally blown apart. I mean, all the cinder blocks, everything, is.
It's beat up pretty badly.
Are they gonna take that section down, or?
they're going to cut it and repair it. We have the restoration company here, if you would like to testimony to that effect, but I don't believe, I believe it's salvageable. Mhm.
I'm guessing it's got to pass all the structure standards.
Exactly.
Code.
It's got to pass IBC and BOCA.
Yes.
Okay.
And our construction office, they have to obviously apply for all the permits through our construction office, and they'll be handling that as well.
And the other thing, as far as, I'm sorry.
Not a problem, sir.
I mean, the next thing would be is, as far as a security guard, is this a permanent security guard per employee, or is this going to be a constant turnover?
That's a question, I guess.
Is that under our purview?
Well, I think they've agreed that it's going to, that the person who's going to live there is going to be the night watchman, but I guess it could change.
Well, right. And in how many? One?
I don't know, Mr. Shire?
One.
Well, again,
Well, let me ask you this,
if it's a security guard, if it's a security guard, it's one person.
Right.
It's not a
Is there-
family unit.
Yeah, well, actually, I think they've agreed it's not going to be rented out to anyone other than a security guard.
Correct.
How many bedrooms does this apartment have?
One.
One bedroom? Okay.
All right, 'cause I
Conceivably, I guess it could be
Yeah, I'm just saying,
the
it's
security
not
guard
an
and
apartment.
his spouse, right.
It's not an apartment. Only again, I never got to see the plans. I just got this letter last week, and so I never got to review it. But again, we look forward to having somebody in that building at this point. We just want to make sure, it conforms to the highway.
Were you able
And
to
this
see
is-
the proposed?
No.
Okay, you can take a look.
Right. Mm-hmm. I will have to see, they're looking at this side, I'm sorry, the right side of the building, which is the north side. Right here. This is along our property.
I don't think that big driveway is over there, right?
No.
Okay.
Well, there's only like 5 feet between the
Right,
buildings.
okay.
But, all right, well, again, we'll, look at it, and I'll be glad to have it.
Wait, that's going to be a problem for you during the construction phase? I mean,
No, again, as long as, we know what's going on, because we just put an application in, for paving our lots, because that's part of our deal.
Right.
And, again, we have to pave up to that building. So, again, there could be an issue, when they go to do that side of the building, because it's all stucco, and all that stucco is falling off.
there's sex.
Well, first of all, it's up to Mr. Flows to grant that temporary construction easement.
Right.
He's not obligated to do so.
Correct.
All right, so, I mean,
Well,
the question is, if he doesn't grant you that easement because he's concerned about damage to his property, how are you going to do the construction?
We're certainly going to guarantee to him that we're not
Any
going to
da-
damage his property.
Well, I think you
Correct. Well,
want to
yeah,
see
yeah.
something.
Oh, yeah.
You
I
want
mean,
to see a new building. don't you?
Absolutely. Again, we look forward to having somebody there, but that building has been nice for forever. For the 40 years I've been there.
And you will try and cooperate as best as possible for them to
Absolutely.
affect their construction.
As long as we can have, conversation.
And I'll tell you what, if there's going to be a temporary construction easement, you'll provide a copy for me to review as well, obviously, since it's affecting this site.
No, and again, I have no problem with it. It's just, that I just, it's
And
right up
typically-
against our property line and our building, so it's just, it's been, all
I understand your concern, sir.
right.
Yeah, and typically when we have a situation like that where where an applicant needs a temporary construction easement to build a portion of the project, it's usually laden with conditions, and one of those is that, the property that's being traversed is returned to, pre-construction condition or better.
Right.
So those are the kind of things that need to get incorporated into your agreement with the applicant.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's something you want to make sure is in there.
Absolutely.
The only thing I would be concerned about, on behalf of the, not objector, but the questions here, paving is never the same after it's put down once
Right.
to put it back again. So it would probably be in the best interest, I don't know when this project's going to take place, and I don't know when you were planning on paving.
It could be
but
within.
I hate to see your paving ruined.
I understood. And again, we have to wait, probably 2 weeks to get the permit. We were looking to have it done before the cold, so we're talking before the end of this month.
All right. I doubt that they're going to be doing that. But
No.
Well, our plans are much ahead, so it's,
But as the engineer
But
said,
we'll
Mr. Dargy
talk.
said it's got to be brought back to as good
Yep.
or better.
Exactly.
Okay, again, you know, it's just,
That could even be considered a partial repaving if need be. I'm not trying to spend anybody's money, but,
Right.
but that's, repaving a small portion of a parking lot isn't
Okay.
something that's, a heavy lift for a project of this
Right.
scope.
okay.
Anything else, sir?
No, not for me.
Board members, any comments for the witness? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for coming forward.
Thank you.
Best of luck on your project, too.
Thank you.
We are going off the air. If you're watching at home, thank you for joining us. Check in for our next exciting meeting. What day will that be, the 18th? Episode 2.
No, that would be November 7th.
November 7th.